He's been playing like a man possessed. Rassie also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby you just heard. Welcome back.
Can you believe it? This is it. This is the final round of the Rugby Championship. It just seems to go by so fast. It's also the last match, Sim, of the Springboks on, last week was the last match of the Springboks on home soil, so we're not going to see them again in South Africa for the remainder of the year. It seems like it was short-lived, but it's a biggie. It's the final round, and although we saw a great Springbok performance, the All Blacks, the Wallabies will think that if cards fall in the way that they want them to, they could still be in with the championship.
Yeah, look, Wallabies need a lot of luck because they, at the very least, they need a bonus points win, and then they need our result to go in their direction. Even the All Blacks actually need a lot if you think about it, because of that points difference. Like we plus 55 and the All Blacks are minus 6. And so if they do beat Australia, I think first things first, they need a bonus point to make up for the fact that they're a point behind us first, and then they need to pack on the points on them. I don't know. Look, I mean, the Boks still need to win, so there's no point us getting ahead of ourselves as well. But yeah, it's one of those tricky ones where you sit and you think, actually, don't rush to conclusions.
Yeah, no, it's way too early. And Paul, I think, managed to put together a little graphic with permutations. I say that it's not that complicated, really. And I think what the big thing is, well, I mean, so he did one good thing. He put together the little box on the right-hand side, but the one on the left where it just looks like I'm in utter distress, I don't know. He had to make up for it in some way. But if the Boks lose, I love that one. Pack up and start the URC. But it will be, by the time they take to the field, a pretty straightforward equation for the Springboks, which is good. It's good that we're playing in the later game. They go into it knowing exactly what it is they need to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened last week. Last week, obviously watching the All Blacks, I think starting at 7 or whatever it was in the morning, you could, by the end, you knew, the Boks knew exactly what they needed. And the simple equation for the Boks was that the All Blacks needed to win, but not by a bonus point. And then Australia needed to lose, but not get a bonus point. And that's exactly what happened. It was one of those weird ones. And then obviously the Boks kind of like went big, which then I must admit, compared to last week, this is probably a lot less that graphic. I think we look a lot more scared than we should be. But by the same token, obviously you can't take anything. You can't take anything for granted either. But yeah, it's we'll see what happens. Especially looking at the teams, because that's the other thing. On the one hand, you've got people that haven't changed much, and then you've got people that have gone completely to town with their changes. So a lot going on in terms of what the sort of various teams are trying to achieve from this round, in terms of trying to roll that final sort of dice to make sure that they can get it done.
Yeah, we'll take a look at both sets of teams. The All Blacks have, I think, gone and made 6 changes, a couple of very interesting changes on the Australian side as well. And I think both sides having to contend with injuries as well. We'll also take a look, obviously, at both Los Pumas and the Springboks. Elijah, thanks for the comment. We love them. Do drop your questions or comments if you're watching us, saying that Boka, Boka, Boka. I love that one. And then reminding us, Twickenfontein. Thank you very much, Elijah. I'll try tried not to forget Owen going to the game, he says, and got my SFM Sacha FM sign at the ready. Hope I'm on TV, Mom. I didn't know you were in Londres. You must enjoy the match. It really is a great place to watch rugby. It's always when the Springboks are there, well supported. And I suppose we'll have to wait to see whether the Argentine home advantage has anything going for it. I'm sure there are a couple of Argentinian fans going to come out, but I do think that it's going to be about 60 or 70% Springbok. So I don't know when last you were at Twickers, but every time they come out, the green jerseys do too.
No, the thing is, I mean, I think to get a sense of just how many South African fans you should expect there, consider that when we played against the All Blacks in 2023 in that pre-World Cup friendly, I think the place was choked up with South African fans, and obviously, the All Blacks are basically the Brazil of rugby. Therefore, you expect them to kind of like have fans everywhere. A, they own, and then B, neutrals deciding to put on that famous jersey. So I with Argentina, I just don't think it'll be the same. You saying 60-70%? I'm thinking probably at the very least 80 to 90. It's I spoke to Jan van Graan, who coaches Bath. Obviously, he got that treble last year with them. And I was asking him, whether this move by Argentina kind of like potentially handed the Rugby Championship to South Africa. And he was saying, yeah, I know it definitely is. He says he watched that 2023 game. He says it felt like being at Ellis Park. So yeah, it might be a bit tricky for Argentina, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I tried speaking Afrikaans on the express from the airport just to see if anyone would react, and it's a rush. Don't do that. Don't speak Afrikaans. In the middle of London, someone will know exactly what it is you're saying. Emmanuel with a great question, asking. So, question. Yeah, what are the logistics for the trophy presentation? Will it be in Australia or London, he asks. And that's a really good question. I've got a theory. I don't know for sure. My theory is that, well, it's one of two. It's either they've done the equation loosely and have decided that the likelihood is that it will end up happening at Twickenham, but also, we do live in the age where they can have more than one trophy. And just not necessarily stated. So also wouldn't be surprised if there's a replica.
I think the really good thing is, though, I think the deciding factor is the fact that the All Blacks and the Australia and All Blacks game is earlier, period.
Yeah.
And so by the time they finish their game, nobody's won. And so you're not giving anyone a trophy because nobody's won. And so that's why. So if we win, then suddenly it's like, okay, cool, give it to them. But if you don't win, like Paul said, you pack up, but you just pack up the Rugby Championship trophy and fly it across. Maybe fly it back with referee Andre Piardi, because he went from he went from reffing in New Zealand to reffing at Twickenham. So maybe you can send it back with him, especially after all
but it's going to take like 30 hours
of making some New Zealand calls, But yeah, I think, I mean, in all seriousness, I think because it's the Aussie game is an earlier one. There's no winner by then. The tournament isn't completed. Therefore, it makes no sense to try and get pictures of somebody hoisting the cup when the competition is not decided.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about having such a close rugby championship, and this is why I love Emmanuel's question, because we actually haven't had to contend with going into the last round not knowing that the All Blacks are going to take it, or maybe it's the Springboks versus the All Blacks. There's a very certain decider when it doesn't go the way of the All Blacks. So yeah, it would be quite interesting if it was one in the earlier game, in the early kickoff. By the end of the day, when the Springboks play and let's say they lose and, touch wood, they're not actually going to have a presentation should the All Blacks go on and win the championship. It'll have to be flown over to New Zealand. So it is an oddity and well spotted, Emmanuel. I think, it'd be interesting to find out from the organizers exactly how they plan for that one. Julian is going to take up some odds here.
I was about to have a whinge about, this is what you get when you decide to finish your Southern Hemisphere tournament in the Northern Hemisphere, but actually it would have made zero difference.
No difference.
Because if anything, I think that the Argentina South Africa game would have started even later, because it starts at 3 this weekend. It would have started at 5. So either way, like there's nothing that could have been done. So there's no point of me even trying to whinge about, but you see, this is what happens when you decide to to mess around with to mess around and take a Southern Hemisphere tournament to be decided in the North. Actually, nothing happens. Sorry.
Yeah, but it is a fascinating one, and thanks for that question, and to keep them coming. Let's take a look at the teams then as they'll run out at Twickenham or Twickenfontein, because I mean, from a Springbok perspective, not really too much to talk about, because Rassie is pretty much stuck with what he's got available to him. And even when I listened to what he was saying about the injuries leading into last week's match, with Ox not able to play, with Grant Williams not able to play, he mentioned that it was minor niggles. So immediately straight back into the starting, lineup goes Ox, Grant via the bench. But it tells me that those two guys would have been retained had they played last week. So very little in terms of change. And that's we're not used to that anymore. I suppose there's more to talk about on the bench rather than in the starting 15.
Yeah, listen, as a sports writer, I don't like this new Rassie. This settled guy, this guy who, who names unchanged teams. What's that? I mean, I liked it better when it was just all chaotic and we had no idea.
You guys are spoiled. You're spoiled for subject matter.
No,
You're spoiled.
Do you understand? So we've got a thing at work we're called First Take. So what you do is you go and shut yourself in a little room where, like, all you do is you just basically throw in like you just see the team and then you go and kind of like you've got to go and write your own analysis in terms of what you think they're trying to achieve by picking a team like that. So obviously I would have done something on pretty much the same team last week, because Ox only was withdrawn late with the from the starting lineup. So I would have done. So now I'm sitting in that room. I'm like, okay, well, now what? What I'm supposed to do? No, I'm sorry. I don't like this new Rassie. I prefer the old Rassie who's in our head without us knowing what's in his. This settled oak. The settled oak sounds a little too much like a guy's getting, he's ready to be married. And no, I don't like this oak.
He's gone with a 5-3 split. He's gone with a 5-3 split again.
Yeah,
I mean, what are
we? I don't like this new guy. It's just too settled. He's like a Bali. We liked it when we had like a crazy coach where A, we didn't know what he was going to do. B, I suspect he didn't know what he was going to do. I liked it. This is not working for me at all. I have to actually work for a change and be like, no, maybe this is what he's trying to do. No, that's just insane. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
No, okay. But from a serious perspective, though, I think Rassie has decided. I mean, he's obviously found a team that can play this game that he wants to. Because remember, last weekend's game, essentially the changes that were made to last weekend's team were basically injury enforced only. So kind of like he's actually almost had 3 weekends in which he had no real intention of changing the starting lineup. So I think what's actually happened is he's finally arrived at a team that he feels like can. Well, it's probably 2 things. A, he's arrived at a team that he feels like can play this game that they're trying to play. I want to say Tony Ball, but I've been reliably told that he apparently hates it, which is probably why we're going to keep calling it Tony Ball. But that's a story for another day. And then the secondary part is, I just think it's the time of the tournament. You know what? If you were sitting after Australia, after Australia, after both games against Australia, you've got the 22 points and then shipping 38 and losing. And then after the second game, where like actually if they'd taken a couple of their chances and managed their game a bit better, this is the Aussies, they could have beaten us 2 games in a row. I think after then, if somebody had told Rassie and them that they would actually be the ones holding, the best hand, the best hand of cards going into this final weekend, he would have bit your hand for that. So now I think maybe it's a combination of that kind of like, geez, we felt like we're so far behind the 8 ball, but we now like suddenly ahead of it. Maybe we shouldn't kind of jinx it by, getting all silly again and mixing and matching. Just just keep it tidy until this is over, and then just move on. So I think it's one of those two things where the time of the tournament dictates that he stick to what he knows, or sticks to the good formula that they finally got to after all of that experimentation. And then the second part is maybe he's sitting and thinking, you know what, I finally have a team that can sort of consistently play this game that we've kind of been talking about for such a long time.
Yeah, I heard him in the press conference where he announced the team, and they haven't had a lot of practice time. I think he's only had 2 sessions this week. So he said he also didn't want to necessarily disrupt things too much when it comes to selection. And then he made a statement. He sort of said, we are still chasing the perfect game. So I think you're spot on. He wants to try and sustain those performances that we've seen in flashes, at the end of the match against the All Blacks, the end against the RGs, the beginning of the match against the Australians. So he's certainly chasing that. I didn't stick myself in a room and take a look at the team, but the one thing that I immediately thought, and it's probably an unfair thought, maybe because of just one name, is, are the guys on the bench having to fight for their place? And the only exception to that maybe is at 9. So Paul, I'm going to ask you to stick that team up again, because the bench to me really is fascinating. I look at Bongi Mbonambi, and we've spoken about him and whether or not he's really fighting for his place in that squad, let alone the team. I think Jan Hendrik, Wilco, Erkia, Kwacha, no problem. Grant Williams and Quibus, I think Grant would have started had it been 100% fit last week. Mani obviously is there to open things up in the second half. And there's Jesse Creel. I mean, there's a lot of rotation happening in that sort of 23 jersey as well. No, Andre Esser is in, and Andre I thought did very, very well. But again, I could be basing this all on that one name that we've spoken about, that of Bongi. Is he the guy who has to, or is probably thinking when he gets the opportunity to come onto the field after an hour or maybe in the beginning of the second half, he needs to highlight and face?
Yeah, I'd have to say, it's one of those things. I think he had he had a media day yesterday for a story sort of embargoed for this morning. I didn't attend it. My colleague did, and I had kind of said to my colleague, it'll be interesting to see what Bongi says. But like, Bongi is one of those guys with the media. He can be sort of guarded to the point of defensive. I think he's probably one of those guys in private that really don't value why the media is around, which is fair enough. I mean, he's not the first and he's not the last, but it doesn't matter how you want to look at the Bongi situation. From when he was playing for the Sharks and to the few games he's played for the Springboks, he just hasn't looked like the old top dog. Bongi was nicknamed top dog because, he has haunt, and over and above that, he's kind of like the guy that sets a tone for the Springboks sort of intensity and physicality.
Yeah.
And if we're all being brutally honest, he just hasn't had that this year. Obviously, we have no idea why that is. Too often players, rugby players play with carry injuries and play with them. But it doesn't matter how you want to look at it. He is a man that's got to prove a point when he finally comes on, because he just hasn't been on it pretty much all season. And again, like I was saying, not just with the Boks, but actually also with the Sharks as well. With the Sharks, he had this weird thing where like he couldn't go 20 minutes without having to sit down and and have like the physio sort of like work on him, which maybe is goes back to what I was saying, which is he might be carrying something, or he has been carrying something long term, but he just hasn't been the same sort of. I mean, I wouldn't say Bongi ever came across as an effervescent guy, but he just hasn't brought that noise that he normally brings from a physicality or an intensity perspective. And the scary thing about Bongi is he's also struggled with, he's also struggled with the basics of, of hooker play, which is, throwing into the line out. I'm always careful not to blame one person for this, because with the line out is needs so many different things to come together to be efficient. It's not just the throw on its own. It's not just the lifters on their own. It's not just the jumper on his own. It's not just the caller on his own calling at the right place, to the right strategy. So it's a lot, but at no stage has Bongi come on and kind of like looked accurate. If even in that aspect of play, forget general play. So if he wasn't, let me put it this way: I would be very surprised if he's not fighting for his place, be it in the general squad or the team itself, like you said.
Well, talking about teams and selections, Emmanuel, thanks for this question as well. How do you think opposition coaches and selectors respond to the Boks team announcement being early in the week? Do they still select to play their own game plan or to counter Boks selections, or is it mind games? And I think it's a great question if you don't have any of that insight. No, Sim isn't going through load shedding, man.
What is this?
No, but it's a really good question. It's a really good question, and it's always interesting when you're in camp because you do see these things play out. And what I can tell you is that it's different strokes for different coaches, right? Like some coaches want to have the team practice in the week and then base a lot of those decisions on what they see on the practice field. Rassie very specifically will pre-select his team, so generally he'll know before the match week starts what he wanted to go with, but then obviously he has to tweak things because injuries happen, and he might have to tweak game plan. He might have to change things up based on what happened in the previous week. But I think for the most part, and it depends again on which coach it is, coaches will know more or less what they want in terms of selection, what kind of game they want to play, and try to not be too reactionary on what the opposition is doing. But that's a general. They have to keep open minds because someone could tweak something in the warm-up before kickoff. That's happened so many times. It could happen in the captain's run on a Friday afternoon, and you have to change the selection again. So they have to be able to go with the flow. But I think for the most part, at least from what I've seen, some with the Springbok coaches, at least that I've been through, they kind of tend to know. There are exceptions to the rule. I remember, and I wonder if I'm being naughty by telling the Divi story, where he selected a team. We were playing against, the Springboks were playing against Scotland. And generally the two assistant coaches, then it was Dick Muir and Gary Gold, who was on our show not too long ago, would have a meeting that come together and then decide on the starting 15 and the bench. And on the Thursday, it would be announced. And that meeting would happen on a Monday, would be the medical sort of assessments and stuff. So by Tuesday, they would sort of know. And then come to the Thursday, and all of a sudden, the team gets announced, and the assistant coaches are looking at each other like, I don't understand. So that happens too, but maybe it's also unique to that coach. But any insight, anything that you've seen that doesn't go to that?
Look, first things first. I hope the opposition coaches don't react like the South African journalists, because I've already told you how we react to Rassie naming his team. Hopefully, with changes so that we can get something to write about. I think with the Boks, it's not really. It's quite weird. Almost sounds counterintuitive. I don't think it's mind games at all.
No.
So essentially, what they do is they announce their team early. They announce it internally early, and then they announce it early for for the public, they so that they can kill the speculation, because it's clear that they seem to think that the speculation building up to, say, a Thursday, can be debilitating for the players who don't know if they're playing or not, or even if they do know, and there's all this, this talk that's way off the mark. So I think what they try to do is they try to regulate their week by announcing their team as early as they can, so that they can go about their business as sort of regularly as they can. And so an example is when Rassie named his team on Thursday, where he was unsure about Sia's injury, whether Sia had kind of healed, but they weren't sure if how he would respond to training early in the week. And then he also wanted to have like a bit of a look at the All Black team, which and the next week after they'd lost at Eden Park, he came back and he said, you know what, in the end, it just ended up buggering up our own week, where we kind of like we were, we just didn't know what we were doing, because we're not used to a week where we kind of like reactive. We're reacting to the other team and the other coaches, instead of actually just going and saying, you know what, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to go about it, and that's it. And so I think with the Boks, they don't try to do that. But I imagine you would be silly as an opposition coach against the Springboks to not want to see that they've got a 7-1 split on the bench. Do you know what I mean? You want to have a look and be like, wait, what? Okay, 7-1 it is. Jeez, what are we going to do? How are we going to try and counter that? Or 6-2, okay, we've seen this before. 5-3, geez, what is he thinking? So I think in some, like in the opposition, actually they probably do kind of like respond a bit to the Boks. And I think the main reason they find themselves having to respond to the Boks is because the Boks have got such depth that they can make changes. So to make an example with this week's team, that backline, they could easily have had, 3 different scrum halves starting. Two other scrum halves, one of 2 other scrum halves starting. At 10, they could have had Manie Libbok, they could have had Andre Pollard. You plan differently for those guys. You have to. You don't have a choice. If we were playing Andre Esterhuizen at 12, you've got a different plan, because Andre Esterhuizen is as big as a house, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So I think the opposition do probably find themselves having to have a bit of a look, so that they can. And the really cool thing is they got 48 hours to do it, because they're only announcing their team, like on Thursday instead of the Tuesday. And then it's even better when Rassie, goes entirely mad and decides to go on a Monday, which he has done twice this year.
Well, that brings us to exactly what it is Argentina are going to go with into that match at Twickenham. And I'd have to consider injuries. Well, you have to consider injuries as well, and how that would impact the team, because there are a couple of changes. It's not a lot, but I thought that at number 8, a very key change with Santiago Condona getting a start. And I only say that because I thought Joaquin Oviedo, maybe not at his best last week, but a really talented guy. But maybe that loose trio is thinking about how best they can slow down South Africa's ball. And it might just be that Oviedo, who's playing off the bench, is maybe a little bit leggy, maybe a little bit tired. Maybe, he's played a lot of rugby. There's the travel aspect as well. That change at number 10, I think maybe would be an injury-enforced one as well, because, very talented player, Geromino Priscatelli, but, if you're selecting a team, Santiago Carreras, I think has had a massive impact in how Argentina play, and he's been really, really, really good. And Chocobares in a 12 jersey, I thought she goes well in the 13. But it's very hard to know which of these are down to injury, are down to travel, are down to just legginess, or are down to game plan. But I look at that loose trio, and also I think he's got his best locks starting as well. If you take a look at Guido Petit and Rubiolo as well, so trying to firm up that pack, maybe some freshness into the loose trio, slowing down that Springbok ball, but surprised at the selection at 10 more than anything.
Listen, as long as he doesn't have Lavanini as one of any of these locks,
And the
he's in a
walking
good
yellow
space.
card.
I must shame, man. It's a terrible thing that we pick at certain players and just run with stereotypes instead of talking about them as players. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I think at 10, ironic. I mean, I thought Carreras had a good first half. Right down to his goal kicking, but then I felt like he fell off the game. But you could point to him and say he fell off the pace, but the whole Argentina team fell off the pace in the second half. Yeah, so you can't really put it on one guy. I think at 10, the one guy that would have loved to play against us is Thomas Albornoz. If that guy had had been fit, because he came off the bench having come back from injury, and I think he did another injury, but it wasn't before he scored. I think he scored something like 6 international tries in his career, and 3 of them against us. So he doesn't mind playing against us, and we always find it difficult. I think the Xhosa commentators were saying, yeah, we're pretty sure that this guy has got butter put all over him because he's just so slippery when it comes to the defense. So I think they probably would have liked to go that way, having sort of eased him back from the bench last week. But I think they've kind of been forced into that. And then what they're trying to do is they're trying to sort of balance themselves off, because Santi Carreras played 15 at Nelspruit last year. And so maybe they just kind of like, it's probably one of those things where they're trying to get as many of their best players on the field as possible. Like, look, it doesn't matter how you want to look at it. If you lose 67-30, you've got to change something. And so these guys have gone and made changes. And, if you're looking at the loose trio and you're saying maybe the idea there is that, they need to slow down ball. Of course, they need to slow down ball, because that's exactly what killed them, last time. They were, that's exactly what killed them, because they were, they basically, Boks were getting quick ball. Sacha was getting quick ball on the front foot. You don't want a guy like that to be getting that kind of ball. And so I think that the changes that they've made are in part enforced by injury. And if you remember Garcia, the scrum half, he came off with his neck heavily braced, and that's he's in for a long recovery to try and and get himself better. So I think the changes were part enforced by injury, and then the changes had to be enforced by by the result from last weekend. And so I think you put those two things together, you then have a situation where you've got this team that they've got, and they've got a 6-2 split on the bench, because I think they still want to try and take us on up front and keep up that kind of pressure. And I think if you take a guy like Oviedo and you put him on the bench, and you take a guy like Juan Martin Gonzalez, who plays for Saracens, I think, and plays in England, you get those guys, and he's an ex-Sevens player. You get those guys to come off the bench and kind of like theoretically turn up the screw. So I mean, they've made plans, I think, based a lot on what they couldn't solve, on the issues they couldn't solve last week. And then what we obviously need to know now is whether those changes are actually going to be able to work, because it's one of those things. We've been going on about how good it is that the Boks can actually name an unchanged team. It always sounds great in theory to say an unchanged team is great, but like sometimes even in an unchanged team, you can actually get like you can actually struggle to strike the same notes as you did the last weekend. I think a great example of an unchanged team when it comes to the Boks, which I think is why Rassie and them don't really like naming unchanged teams. Is remember the teams they chose for France and England in the quarterfinal and the final was the same team. And by the time the team played against England in that semi-final, they were so flat at the start that Rassie was so spooked he went with the 7-1 split for the final. So yeah, it
Yeah,
always sounds
yeah.
great. It always sounds great to think, yes, you've got an unchanged team, therefore you've got a better chance of getting an unchanged result. But actually, sometimes you just test matches are like like a day in your life. They seem like the same because you're going to take your car to go pretty much the same way to work, but if you spill your coffee in your lap as you get into the car, that's a totally different day already, regardless of the fact that the rest of it is the same. So test matches are a bit like that as well.
Yeah, please remind me at the end of this before we say goodbye to quickly talk about World Rugby's decision limiting the number of matches that elite men and women's players can play, because I think that's going to have an impact. But I just wanted to quickly touch on what's happening in Perth this weekend, and it's a biggie between Australia and New Zealand. Take a look at the selections. Maybe let's start with we've got them both. With the Wallabies, because James Slipper will go down as a Wallaby legend. He didn't play, when the Wallabies were at their best, were the strongest that they'd been in their history. But yeah, I think it's a big one for him to finish off. They've already lost the Bidislow Cup, unfortunately. But sure, the man's been around. And he's also one of those players that they keep calling him back. And I keep wondering, because he says he's going to keep playing for the Brumbies, if we won't see him again re-emerge, maybe on the end of year tour or again next year or what have you. But interesting selection. Alan Alatoa coming back in. And my very big surprise, I suppose, but I think, he's had to bide his time. Tane Edmund going at 10. This must be the third guy or fourth guy they've tried at fly half since the start of the Rugby Championship.
Yeah, I did say. So the first time I came across Tane Edmund's name was when the Aussies were in South Africa, and I think it was it Ben Donaldson that got injured during their captain's run, and suddenly he couldn't play off the bench, and so they got Tane Edmed to slot into the bench for the Ellis Park game. And I remember making that stupid joke about Tane Edmed sounding like the medical aid scheme, obviously because he'd come on as as an injury replacement. Look, he's clearly a guy that they've kind of like got one eye on, for the future. If I remember right, he's quite stocky, and he's like a ginger. He's quite stocky for a 10. He looks like one of those guys who can look after himself physically. So I mean, I think now they've gotten to the point where they kind of sitting there and they're thinking, you know what, you might as well play him, because I think as much as James O'Connor has been great for them, he's made actually throughout the competition, he's also made sort of mistakes that have cost them. If you go back to Cape Town, I can't remember, he had a couple of misses at poles, which would have actually helped the Aussies win that game, because it was quite a tight game. And then I think last week he kicked a couple of penalties dead, and there was another mistake that I can't remember now, just off the top of my head. So as calming,
the beginning of that Wallabies game at Ellis Park as well, he kind of lost.
He looked frozen. He looked frozen. Yeah. He looked frozen in that first 20 minutes, and he wasn't doing anything. He's getting caught behind the gain line. So although calming and influence as he has been, he actually has had his moments as well. So maybe they're kind of sitting and thinking, you know what, we might as well invest in the future and get on with it. And obviously a guy like James Slipper also announcing that after 150 test caps or whatever it is, that he's finally going to call it a day. Look, they're not short at loose head prop. I highly rate Angus Bell. I think Angus Bell is a sensational player. And then obviously you've got Tom Robertson this weekend coming off the bench instead of Angus Bell. So it's not like they don't, it's not like they don't have options. That's a good thing for Australia, because one of the big issues for Australia over the last few years is that they haven't had the depth, because between guys going overseas and guys choosing to play league rather, or one other sport, probably like AFL or whatever, they haven't been able to kind of like say, okay, who's next, who's next, who's next. And I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing. It's a good thing for them to kind of have a situation where they're sitting and they're going, okay, we've got another sort of cab out of the taxi rank. So I don't mind that. But the big selections actually is the return of Big Will Skelton and Rob Valentini
Yeah.
on the bench. Skelton has done incredibly well for them in the tight exchanges when he has been able to play for them before he got recalled back to to La Rochelle. And Valentini, before he had his calf issues, has been very good as well. So actually, they look quite good. I won't lie to you. I wouldn't be surprised if the Aussies won this game.
I have that feeling. I have a feeling that they want to finish strong. They're at home. The All Blacks are a team under pressure, and if the Wallabies can get under their skin, and they can do the thing that they've done in the matches that they have won, and that's finish strong, whereas the All Blacks in the matches that they've lost, with a bit of a slow finish, I kind of think that the Australians have a really good chance in this match. And while we've got that graphic up, a couple of changes as well for New Zealand, with Scotty Barrett back into the starting side, captaining from lock. I think Peter Lakai also promoted at number 8, Wallace Satiti, Tamati Williams, Fletcher Newell, they're also coming in. So it's quite a few changes. Damian McKenzie at fly half, I'm not really a fan. I like Damian as a player, but I'm not a fan of him starting matches. I think he's one of those guys who finishes them off so well. I really like him off the bench, but you don't. You feel differently about him just in terms of the position that he's been selected in. Quinn Tupea at outside centre. That's a pretty big one. I seem very. I don't know. I've seen a much more settled All Black selection on the wings, with Lester Fainganuku now back in on the left wing. It feels like they don't really quite know who their best wings are at the moment, and they've tried a couple of options as well. Pretty decent bench. And it's got some intent about it. I like Topolotu, Setiti, Cortez Ratima, very good player at number 9, and he's missed out a bit due to injury.
Do you think he's named after the shoe, the Nike
Cortez?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm just asking.
I don't know. I just like saying his name.
Yeah, no, it's like that old song with Zambia and shows like Cortez.
Oh, Cortez!
Look, I think that
not giving away our age.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, man, it won't happen again. I think the wings. I like Narrower and who's the sevens guy now? Jeez, I've completely drawn a blank. Who's the sevens guy who's just come back? Who's just come in? Yeah, Carter. I like those two, Leroy Carter and Narrower. I like those two. I think if they play those two, they've got a nice thing going. This is a strange thing. I've always seen Lester Fainganuku as a bit of as more of a center, outside center. Quinn Tupaya, I like that they're going to start with him. I thought he and Scott Barrett played well together whenever he came on off the bench, so I'm quite keen on that. And then look, I mean, D-Mac, I must admit, just as a 10. He's just, maybe it's the guys he came in after, the Carters of this world, the Richie Moungas of this world, the Bowden Barretts, that maybe he just suffers in comparison. But yeah,
so you prefer him at fullback? So.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as a fullback or maybe, as a fullback, I've got absolutely no problems with D-Mac, but as a 10, it's weird. It's a terrible thing to say, but like whenever the Boks have played the All Blacks with him at 10, there's like this hope within me. I probably shouldn't say it because it sounds like an unkind thing to say, but I must admit there's a bit of hope within me that it's not going to be as tough a game as you think. So I do think D-Mac at 10, but he's playing against a guy who's got a handful of caps, if that.
Yeah.
So I mean, after two flies, he's more experienced, and so actually, if he doesn't go well in this game, then maybe then maybe he's got a bit of a problem, go looking forward.
Yeah. Well, if you're in London and you're watching this. I beg your pardon. Please tell us what the weather is like, because I believe it's going to be very windy on Saturday. Rassie said in the press conference that it was very, very warm. It felt like a South African sort of spring day, but I believe it's going to not be quite that come Saturday. And we're going to wrap it up. But before we do, there was that announcement by World Rugby that there's going to be a limit on the number of games that elite men's and women's players can play, and that's 30 games a year, that they'll have to have a mandatory 1 week break after each international that is played. I'm not quite sure if that means they're not allowed to play back-to-back tests. I don't quite think it means that. And then there's obviously a mandatory rest period. Yeah,
it's probably a series. It would make sense. It would make more sense if it was a series, because I mean you can't set it. You can't have your team changes dictated to by resting protocols, as opposed to like how you're trying to play. You still need to be able to put together the kind of team that you want to put together. It's it's a step in the right direction. I quite like that idea. I mean, the South African players are currently playing 12 months a year as things stand.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And they're kind of resting at the worst possible times for their teams. You look at the Sharks. When you buy like a whole host of top end Springboks, you think, okay, we've got a team strong enough to have a go at the Toulons, the Toulouses, the Bordeaux, the La Rochelles, and all of those teams. And then what happens is you suddenly you can't play them because they've got their Bok rest for like 6 weeks, and and you're sitting there and you're like, hang on, wait, what just happened? I think it, but it's all good and well for World Rugby to go, we're gonna impose, or the powers that be, that to impose that we're going to have 30 matches every year for the players. I still think the best way to make that happen is that global season. Then everyone is kind of like on the same page. So it sounds great. Everyone's like, let's do it this way. But actually, without a global season, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, it still keeps coming back to that, and we had a great chat. If you missed the conversation we had with Nasport, it was very opinionated as well when Sim brought it up. So make sure you find that one on our channel. Share this with anyone who loves these conversations. We love also hearing from you, so thanks for the comments, guys, and do keep them going even after this live conversation. Looking forward to 2 really good matches to wrap up the Rugby Championship. Sim and I will be back on Sunday morning to break it all down, at least deal with the emotions and the reactions and everything that happens post. Make sure you give us a like, share, and a subscribe. Sim, I'll check you out on Sunday. I'm going to be watching the match from Loftus. I'm going there. We haven't even had a chance to talk URC, but I'm going there for the Bulls Leicester game. So I'm going to have to watch the test match. I don't know from where. I'll find a TV or I'll sit on that.
No, you can go into Loftus Park. You can go into Loftus Park.
Yeah, fair enough.
Usually they have a big screen going.
But then it's dangerous because I want to be sober by the time the Bulls match starts. So it's high risk stuff.
Listen, now you're no longer looking for solutions. Like, I gave you a solution, and now you're like, but I can't.
I'm making my excuses in advance. That's all it is. So always good. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll check you on Sunday. Cheers. Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of that Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassie finds loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it. Welcome back to That's Your Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show.
It's that Rugby Union Show.